Peace, family. This is your boy Juro. It is Sunday, the 16th of January, 2022. How is everybody doing? First and foremost, I'm well. I know that some of y'all may have been wondering, hey, we heard about that tsunami due to the eruption outside of the city of Tonga. It was an underwater eruption, um, and you may have been concerned about the impact of the the water current, being that it was going where west coast up to as far as Alaska down, as well as Australia and South America. Fine, we're good over here. Um, we're watching the news in regards to a lot of Pacific Islanders may have family that are organically from that region. But we're just like you. Health is great, doing well. But first and foremost, this video is protected by the Fair Use Act, Section 107. All intellectual media properties are to said uh, owners. In the background, you may hear uh, music playing in the background, but right now it's through YouTube channel, YouTube Music, which is by a proprietorship through Google, and uh, this is used for entertainment, critique purposes, and educational purposes only. All rights are reserved to those said proprietorships that they are entitled. So, I woke up this morning, and I'm grateful I woke up this morning. But I had something cross my mind yesterday. And he said, well, okay, Gerald, you're always thinking, what is it? What's going on? What are you about to speak on? And I had an epiphany um, yesterday. Number one, be grateful that you exist. No matter what your reality is, you would not have it, or it would not have an impact on you if you did not breathe, first and foremost. So, I'm thinking about how this beginning of the year has had little emotional triggers globally, in nationally, in a town near you, city near you, state near you, worldwide, in some way. And I tried to find the underlining understanding for myself of how what is being illustrated has an impact in my life. Now, like many of you, you woke up New Year's Day. Some of you may have had a a surgence to change whatever that had been long standing in your life. Whatever it may be, you know what that may be. But you made that conscious decision that you're in a position of no more talking. It's about action. And I thought about that. I thought about it a little bit more because when you look at the emotional framework, first of all, you're a spiritual being first. First. So, with that, scientifically, the body gives off two frequencies that are registered: love, fear. So, yin, yang. Okay? Depending on what your foundation or what your perception is, in your current life state will dictate how it is illustrated in your life. So, as you've always heard me say and echo, we as people teach people how we desire to be treated. But see, desire is an action word. So, how can you put forth action on something that you have not come to accept? Who am I talking to? You know what you need to do. You even envision the end goal. But what about the journey? What about the things you do not know, the things you do not see? What about that? See, just like you hear people say, well, the road to success is built off of steps. You can't get to Z without starting at A, right? But what if you're not in a place emotionally to identify what defines what that first step is? What about that? What about that? So, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but try to follow with me. So last night, I'm sitting here in the garage. I got the TV on, and it was the very first time where I was in a place of accepting what was deemed the narrative. So what do you mean, Gerald? See, for those who've been traveling with me, first of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because you're the reason I do it. And if this is the first time that you're stumbling on this channel, my name's Gerald Davis. I've had this channel since October of 2011. I speak about life. I speak about relationships based on my experiences and perceptions based off of experiences. And I try to find the wisdom because it's about each one, teach one. That's the only way that growth can be received. Who am I talking to? But see, at the end of the day, family, when you wipe away all the distractions, all the deflections, all the things that require identification and ownership, it's still your story, which will be the spiritual breadcrumbs for your lineage, because it is nothing but your legacy. What you're going to leave behind when the said moment and said time when you're called home. No person knows when that may be. That way in itself, that should inspire you to live your best life. But how do you understand what that is defined? What does that look like for you? But you know what is usually the problem? That becomes kind of clouded because still in 2022, there are people that do not know what the framework of what their happiness looks like. Who am I talking to? So, while I'm in conversation with my companion, and I said, I look at the road that I've traveled. I've been all over the world, and that was nothing but God's doing. I served to the best of my ability, service in the United States Air Force, and I still support the federal government, that's what I do, based off of my training and my experience. But no matter what, you're never you'll never get to the place of mastering yourself. Why? Because every time you take a breath, there's an opportunity to learn something. But let's talk about that. How can you learn anything if you don't first identify the presence it has been given in front of you? And then, with that being said, which is your awareness, identify what is required to navigate through it. Who am I talking to? As you've heard the quote, doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome, is the definition of insanity. I think that was coined by scientist Albert Einstein. But it's the truth. If you're constantly looking, navigating whatever that agenda that has your attention, but you're expecting for a different outcome, but you receive the same, it's not the environment. The common denominator is you, because you see it from that perception. You feel it from that effect. Can people relate? Sure. We are what we attract. Why we don't talk about that? And we wonder why in 2022 we are failing those who are coming behind us. I heard someone say, well, I'm kind of scared for what my blueprint of my future is, because I can't have a conversation with my elders, simply because they talk at you, they don't talk with you. And I thought about that. And I was like, you know what? I would hope that anyone that I've given access to my life would never have that perception about me. Because I'm saying that on a couple levels, and I'm going to expound. Number one, it is your responsibility how your life is going to be dictated. And what said choices, which is free will only reveal the outcome that is intended. That is one of the reasons I would always use the term intended heart, intended mind, because it's not for everybody. It is for the intended person at the intended time, because everything that is conveyed from them soup coolers right here comes from the Most High. You know, I get it. On this earthly realm, depending on your doctrinal upbringing, you may acknowledge the Most High as what you've come to know. But I'm going to ask you this. From those theologians, if when Moses was given the opportunity to stand before the Most High, and the requirement was for him to have a veil over his face and look away because of the conversation was so immensely impactful, how can man even say what his true name was? Think about It would be too great to know that truth. So everything that's been conveyed, you have to take it with a grain of salt, or better known as interpretation or allegory. But guess what? Didn't the Most High say, I don't, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I'm not going off of what this is. Everything I need to know about you is found here. But see, if this ain't right, how is this going to understand? And we wonder why man was born in sin. Basically, was born flawed. Why? Because you're going to make choices that you think, based on the influence, has your best interest only. Through time and delivery, the result will be birthed. Who am I talking to? So, drinking my coffee. Good morning. Once again, you're going to hear in the background, if it's picked up, I've got YouTube TV on, which is owned by Google. The artist focus is the group Farside. All intellectual properties under their brand is their sole ownership and full proprietorship of that which is yield from is theirs. No monetization will be done. But this is used for educational and critical purposes only. So, where am I going? I think in 2022, family, some of you are going to do the greatest work that should have been done a long time ago. And some of that may be work, some of those works may be may be shown by one, identifying what's in your environment. Do you understand that? Do you realize how many people have, through conditioning, emotionally conditioning, have taken a place of, I know it's there, I know this isn't conducive, but it is what it is. Some of you may turn around and say, well, you know what? Not only can I identify what makes my environment, but I do identify the fact of what is needed compared to what is required. And you may take a position of acceptance. What do you mean you take a place of acceptance? I'm not talking to continue the cycle, but to break it. Who am I talking to? Because some of you have gotten to a place where you are finally connected with who you are. And you're finally listening. You're finally having that emotional dialogue with yourself, where you are proverbially looking at the pieces and how they play out. And you've gotten to that place of accepting the fact that it must change. But to do that, you must be vulnerable to yourself. Because when you decide to be vulnerable with yourself, the transparency, which will only yield your true voice. Who am I talking to? Why is it that you feel a certain kind of empowerment when you're upset? But it's temporary, it's fleeting, because in the same action, then fear creeps in. Then, depending on what was the illustration, you feel you're alone. Who am I talking to? You're not alone, you never was. But I hate to tell you this. the people that benefit having access to your life, sole purpose was for you to accept that mindset. They wanted you alone. They isolated you. They isolated you. Why? Because they saw all the greatness that you possessed before you did. They knew that from the first hello. And they was hoping that you would not. Who am I talking to? I do one better. Let's throw the relationship dynamic up there. Let's throw it out there real quick. Because if people were transparent, why does manipulation exist? Think about it. You can't have manipulation take place if people are transparent because it requires an action. It requires a dialogue. It requires truth. But what does truth look like to you? And wherever truth is, your smile's right next to it. Your peace of mind is alongside it. Your happiness is waiting to be claimed. Who am I talking to? I mean, look where we're at, 2022. We're more worried about the financial aspect of what someone brings to the table, but don't talk about the things that's required that will make your soul feel at peace. Now here's a contradiction. Because it comes from a place of selfishness. It does. Now there's a difference between being selfish compared to being selfless. See, first of all, if you're from a place of selfishness, that's nothing but negative energy. Remember, the body gives off two: love or fear. That's negative energy. So if you're moving around, you're operating from a place of selfishness. That means you have a premeditated agenda. So how can you expect anything good to come from that energy? No, you won't. That's why you always hear people echo, the devil's work is never done. Why? The devil will give you everything what you want, but it'll be nothing remotely what you need. Who am I talking to? You're trying so hard to move mountains, connect dots, bridge gaps, only to feel disrespected, unappreciated, left holding the bag. That's not your story. That is nothing but an experience that you have to master, because there's a lesson from that. So let's go back. So you've already identified what you need because it was made, you were, the awareness first demonstrated itself. Then, after you have identified the awareness, you've started to process. You've started to weigh what is required. See, not a lot of people are going to do the work, family. We live in a world of opportunists. There's a difference between having an opportunity given to you and a person that's an opportunist. See, a person that is an opportunist has no moral fiber. They have no. They're looking at it from low energy. And that's the only way they see it until it is challenged. That's where the old parable, real recognizes real, comes from. Because, sure, there's nothing wrong to have a strong work ethic and want to be successful. But if it means compromising your self-respect, if it means that it brings pain, That's deception. And anything that's built off of that will fall. You do understand that, right? That's why, biblically, as the scriptures say, He is the truth, He is the light. All things done in dark always come to the light. But mankind does not dictate time. It is time is a masterless art. It requires respect. That's why you hear people say you need to learn to time manage yourself. But let's peel it back more. That time signature only means you better respect the time you got because you don't know when it may be your last. Just like you also hear people say, you miss a good thing when it's gone. If I could go back in time, if I could recant what I said, if I could undo that behavior that I demonstrated, I would. And if I can ad lib just a little bit, but also expand. You know where there's a good example of that scene? And I'm not trying to sound morbid or macabre. You always see that when that person of influence or impact does not have you don't have access to, or better yet, when they're gone. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that play out where there's that one family member and they're in a place of regret. They're in a place of of deep regret because they had the gift of access, the gift of time, and they didn't capitalize on it. And now that person has transitioned. This can also be applied to relationships. How many times have you look on social media and there's always somebody, they're upset now, and they're in a place of remorse, and you know the thinking that they had was the grass is always greener. Well, first of all, that's free will. Secondly, that all could have been undone. That didn't have to play out. But guess what? You know what requires change? Truth. And you got some people that will put up a war to not claim it. They will use every excuse in the book. Oh, no, I couldn't mess with that because they didn't bring this to the table or they were weak. Do you realize when you use the term weak to describe someone, you are indirectly describing yourself? Let this sink in. I'll do you one better. If you've ever gone through a toxic relationship, right? And that person did you very wrong. The greatest wrong they could ever do is not value access to your life. But they try to gaslight it, manipulate it to make it seem like it was you. Well, the Most High has a way that, first of all, anything you speak from the mouth, you just made, that's going to come out in your reality in some form. You do know that, right? Be mindful. That's why your elders, you would always say, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Why? Because on the lowest level, they're saying the power of the tongue has the ability of speaking life into existence of your life. So if it comes from negativity, guess what? Energy out is energy returned. Who am I talking to? Now, here's a stark reality. Some of y'all may have gone through betrayal. And I'm going to tell you what, I wouldn't wish betrayal on anybody. But betrayal has a way of forming itself physically, emotionally, and economically. That's why when you hear people say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I would not do this, I would not do that, and then it happens, and they're shook. They're shook. But they don't realize if you were to go back in time, you already spoke that onto yourself. You spoke it out. That was that was basically divinely saying, or if the devil was working, he said, "Oh, because I'm telling you how the devil works." And thank you for being patient, because I am bouncing around a little bit to make my point. You have some people that think that all is required is for them to pray, and the Most High is going to give you what you ask for, right? Now, you do know that the devil, Satan, Lucifer, whoever you identify as low energy, is like football. The Most High is like the quarterback. He already knows the play to score. To score, meaning having the life that you desire, truly. Well, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, is that defender. You, you speak in existence of what you desire, what you want. Well, guess what? The devil knows the scriptures better than anything on this realm. That's why he perverts it. That's why you see examples of those that are put in positions of leadership in clergy fall short. Because what he does is, oh, okay, work with me. When you, like for example, how many times have you may be at a place where you're alone and you're feeling lonely. You feel like no one gets you. No one sees the beauty of who you are. First of all, you were made perfect the moment you took your first breath. You do know that, right? You were. Think about it. You were made flawless. But before you took your first breath, there was a covenant spoken over your life to give you the opportunity to come to this realm. So there are works that are required that you agreed upon to fulfill. And people fall short all the time. That's why you've heard me say, to know your circle, you should be able to understand the purpose. Because those who have access live the example, and they do it with the mindset of they embody what is represented to make sure you are also inspired to do the same. We are what we attract. So, let's say this. Say the scenario is you're in that position where you want companionship, right? And you indirectly say, well, Lord, I'm a hard worker and I want to be loved. I want a man. That's a typical prayer. And what happens? A man is incarnated into your life. But that man's not blessed because you left it generic. You left it open. So guess what? The devil will say, oh, you want a man? And he will give you the most alluring person so that you will have tunnel vision and focus on that person. Now, here's where it gets tricky. If you get so intrigued in what you see, you will tend to forget what is needed. Number one, the, how can you love someone? That's where that term "love at first sight" comes from. But here's the funny thing about that: how can you embody or receive love if you don't know what love is to love yourself? So what happens? You dictate the timeline of experience. Intimacy is brought in, and just as quick as that energy is brought in, the emotional clock starts to go counterclockwise, and all this drama comes with it. But not once was a conversation of identity. And what I mean by that is, to have true intimacy, you must first know who you are and what makes your foundation. How are you going to build? Like you heard the old parable of building a house on the sand, which was nothing but scripture anyway. How can you build a life with someone you don't know? But then the knee-jerk response is always, when things go sour, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe she did that. That's always the retort. But then the questions that should have been asked, which is the investment, which requires time, which requires action, which requires commitment in the process. The foundation was never built. You know why? Because while you were looking this way, the devil's work is never done, because the things that you fail to do. So what do you mean, Gerald? Queen, right now, the intent through technology is to convince you that to navigate your life does not require you to have a spiritual connection within yourself. Let me go deeper. First of all, if you were born into this world as a female, you were born with two spiritual gifts. Number one, the gift of nurturement. That's why every female can't be called mother. She can bear a child, but she can't. But if she doesn't have a relationship with herself, she will never be able to protect that child. There will always be discourse. Why? Because the child is reliant off of the environment of the mother. So if she's ripping and running, if she's focused in on what matters on this earth and not what's required inside her, that child will never feel safe, and it will more or less be at risk, because it's left spiritually exposed. The second spiritual gift is this: discernment. And you've seen this play out time and time again, family. Now, does a man embrace discernment? Yes. But that only occurs when they have unconditionally made a covenant with the Most High to serve. And in time, through experience, they will be tested. They will be tested, and they will be tested with the intent to break that covenant. Why? Because the devil knows. So let me make this clear. You do understand why, some of y'all may have had a road that was very, very challenging. You know, some of you may have been lucky and then life's challenges didn't hit you until later on in life. But guess what? The devil knew who you were destined to be the moment you took your first breath. So how are they going to let that play out? How is he going to let that? No. I'm going to test that. I'm going to test that with the intent of what? Steal, kill, destroy. Because you may be the person that will bear the child that will change the world. Who am I talking to? But see, society don't want you to have those thoughts. Don't want you to have that dialogue. Doesn't want you to be in that. Doesn't want you to have the ability to have a commonality with like-minded folks. Key word: like-minded folks. So if there's a like-mindedness amongst your community that you gravitate, how can you not acknowledge that we are what we attract? See, the devil's work's never done, because he taught man that opposites attract. No, it don't. What you got to talk about? You ain't got nothing to talk about. Which is nothing but duality. You have some people, unfortunately, that were born on this world to serve his work. And unfortunately, their life was in vain and sad. Can people change? Let me tell you something. I've echoed this through countless videos. I've got well over 1,000 strong, probably about 1,100 videos on this channel alone. And I remember when I was at my lowest point. The whole reason for this channel, if you don't know, was I was going through a very painful breakup. Because, I'm a Pisces. So that means I'm very emotional. I love hard. If I commit to something, I commit to it. But even with that, I'm that proverbial person that I'm holding a candle for you. I'm hoping that you'll see the light. I'm hoping that you'll turn the page. But still, we have our own work to do. And that was the moment that I embraced my spirituality. Now, some of y'all might not realize there's a difference between being religious and spiritual. The descriptive word of religious means pattern, action, behavior. Spiritual means connect. I'm a spiritual being, because you were a spiritual being before you came here. And that's the truth. Because think about it. Think about all those people that, unfortunately, because of whatever the reason may be, you got hurt. You got hurt, you got injured, had to do some surgery, whatever. But guess what? That period of recovery could have been 10 years ago, and you still remember what it felt like the first day you began that journey of healing. That's your spirit. That's why if a person was unfortunately burned or disfigured in some way, it doesn't change the person they are within. Because this, your body's only there to navigate this earthly realm. That's what's required. So, let me go back. So, with that being said, the last 10 years, there's been a narrative of trying to convince the narrative of individualism without identifying, without understanding the identity of it. See, how can you have an identity and if you don't know who you are, how can that not have an effect of the cause and effect is your environment. So, okay, not to be winded, think about it this way. Why is it you look at you first of all, you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with yourself. If your environment is nothing but nurturement of drama, pain, first of all, you're the common denominator, directly or indirectly. You're that pole, right? But what if you decided to say, well, you know what? This ain't gonna work no more. I got to change some stuff up. But before you can change anything up, you must be honest with yourself to understand what's required to change. But before you can even do that, you must take ownership of said practice. Who am I talking to? I do one better. You look at social media today. Society has convinced you queens, like, what was her name? Loretta Lynn Collins? I'm getting on that. Can't think of her name, but she was the female vocal to James Brown's group, and she had 3 albums on her own. But one of her hits was "To Get What I Want." I use what I have to get what I want, right? And that was a narrative that was what was one of the founding blocks to feminism. I said, well, you know what? We're going to empower you. Why can't you have this? Why you deserve that? But what they never tell you is at what cost. What's the cost? You know, just like you used to always hear people say, everybody has a price. You got $1 Million Man on WWE used to use, that was his catchphrase. Everybody has a price. What does it cost you? Nobody wants to have that conversation. So what did society? They pushed the needle again. They said, well, you know what? To get the man of your dreams, you got to carry yourself a certain way. You got to look the part. So you're acting. You're not claiming. You're acting. But at what expense? What expense? And guess what happened? The fashion industry catered to that. So the fashion today mimics the same attire that, unfortunately, the lady of the night, the Jezebel spirit, because when you talk about feminism, that is nothing but the Jezebel spirit. If you don't know what the Jezebel spirit, go up here, put it in your search engine, and read it. Read the story of Jezebel. and tell me tell me if her story does not have the same uh, as today, because it's true. So to go back real quick, because I'm looking at the time. To have a fruitful relationship, you must place God first in everything you do. You have to. So when it comes to your mate, if he doesn't put God first before anything, he can never have a covenant over you, because spiritually it's supposed to be most high, man, wife, child, which means it's yoked. That means it's covered, it's blessed. But see, a lot of times society says, you don't need that, you don't need that. And they've tried everything they can to destroy, deceive the matrimonious infrastructure. They've tried, and unfortunately, instead of people seeing it for what it is, they make excuses and say, well, you know, not every shoe fits. It's not supposed to. It's not supposed to, because that's not your life. You know? So let's talk about friendships. 2022, you are going to sever ties. And some of y'all think that to sever ties, you're going to have acrimonious drama before it takes hold. In other words, some of y'all have this blueprint that what you thought, well, like you could have been dating Bobby, and instead of you being honest with yourself first, there's no way that you could be honest with him. So what do some people do? They start before they stop. And it's typical behavior. You like, oh, well, I'm gonna get off this bus right here. I don't know where this next one's going, but I'm gonna just get on it because it's gonna take me out of the environment that I know. So are you not running from yourself? Are you not? Come on. You know? Or here you go. Well, I gotta get the best result with the least effort. At what price? Come on. 2022 is about change up, come to terms, and make the moves. And that's enough. And I'm trying to pick my words real quick because I'm looking at this. It's been on too long. I needed to make this a part two, and I just might. And that's one of the reasons the effect is you have a lot of people walking around bitter. You know why people walk around bitter? Because they don't want to take ownership for the role that they played, not the role they should have embraced. Well, you know, sometimes sure you got to keep the peace. You got to suck it up. Suck what up? What you should have been doing is protecting your self-respect. That's why you always hear me say the most beautiful word you'll come to know is the word no. Because the word no does not mean forever. It means under review. Caveat, we teach people how we wish to be treated. So if you don't first identify what's not accepted, how can you expect change? Okay, we're going to stop right here. Part 2 is coming.